Previously on Maplestory the novel, Sacred Tears.
But I don't even know how to use it properly, let alone enough to wipe out all darkness.
What if you could teach someone here in Euphoria how to use magic like you?
But even if humans could use mana, how would I find out?
I don't want to stay here too long and risk losing my contract.
It was a gamble we all took with Master Dean. Then why don't you take that knowledge into the world and help defend it?
And now, the continuation of Chapter 18, Part 3.
Into the world and help defend it. People are dying daily from their attacks. All of you have so much power that you could make the world a better place, yet you hide away in the forest doing what?
Tahir snapped, his teeth clenched as his voice echoed off the marble walls. Those surrounding them stopped and stared, murmurs rising. Rhinne sighed heavily, almost appearing regretful.
We have been studying how to find and harness the ultimate light, so that we may use it to purge the world of darkness. The world needs you now! Yes, I know. But Master Dean has also been studying how to use darkness to enhance the light we can use. So what's the holdup? Use this darkness to power your light and wipe it out! It is not so simple!
Rhinne boomed.
The darkness permeating the world is thousands of times more powerful than even Master Dean can combat. We must find the ultimate darkness and use that to empower our light. But more than that, look within this hall and tell me, how many of our clerics do you see?
Tahir lowered his brow, his hand ever close to the handle of his dagger, scanning the room.
I see about 100, he snapped. 94 to be exact. In all the years we have been here, despite all the power you claim we have, we are few, and even fewer of us are fully clerics. Believe me when I say that we want to help, but there aren't enough of us to give the needed help.
Something about Rhinne's words made him never fully reach for his dagger to slay the cleric, relaxing his stance and following him into the cafeteria to eat and talk. As Tahir sat with him and his wife for the morning meal, Rhinne explained the basis for their research, what the ultimate light was, its inward and outward properties, and how it wasn't enough to overcome the darkness despite its power as of yet. As they spoke, Tahir watched the interactions between Rhinne and his wife, noting a well-defined area around them where the air and the world seemed brighter. After his wife left, Tahir prodded Rhinne for more information about this ultimate light. It was intriguing that a couple could be the source of this light, and that the feelings one felt together or even apart gave these clerics power. But what of people who aren't part of this sect? Are they able to produce this light? Rhinne chuckled a bit as Tahir called them a sect.
All humans can create this light. We found it doesn't necessarily come exclusively from couples. It can come from family, friends, or even pets. Though the light coming from a couple is the most potent. It is most likely to have the desired outward-facing property to drive away or eliminate the darkness.
Tahir's face slowly fell as a realization came over him, his skin becoming pale and his hands cooling.
Can light protect against darkness without using it as a weapon or directing it through a focus?
He asked, his voice becoming serious. Rhinne seemed taken aback.
Yes. We have found in most cases it can stave off or eliminate most lesser forms of darkness.
Tahir stumbled back in his chair, pushing his hand through his hair as his breathing quickened.
It wasn't you who was responsible for their deaths.
It was me, Tahir whispered, pushing his hands through his hair but barely making it through as the strength left his arms. His whisper might as well have been a shout in the quiet of the meal hall. Chills began to run up his spine, and the color drained from his face.
It was me. It was me the whole time,
Tahir wailed, burying his face in his hands, shaking hard as the thought continued to spread through his mind like a cancer. The world fell away from him, and all he could hear were the words repeating over and over in his mind that he was responsible for their deaths. Everything around him sounded as if it were far away in a dark room.
It was me. It was me the whole time,
he muttered, clutching at his face with his fingers until a strong hand wrenched him into an upright position, and a burst of light exploded in his eyes. When the rainbows he saw finally faded, a girl stood before him, with Dane beside her.
Tahir, look at me. Tell me what has made you so distressed in clear and precise words.
Dane instructed. Tahir began to explain in a convoluted flood of words when Dane gripped his shoulder harder than he thought possible for a mage.
Slow down. Tell me, what is troubling you? Slowly.
Dane commanded. Tahir took a ragged breath and tried to explain once again.
I asked Viren to explain what the ultimate light was, and after he did, I asked if normal people could make this light. He said we could, and that light can just passively erase darkness. It then made me realize that my beloved Talea was attacked when I wasn't near her.
Dane gently squeezed his shoulder again to stop him, looking him dead in the eye.
Why were you away from her?
The girl asked.
We had just fought. What about? I can't remember. And I left to cool my head, but I clearly remember telling her she would have done what I asked if she were truly a worthy wife. It was me. I was the one that killed her by dimming the light we shared.
Tahir, look at me.
Dane commanded. Slowly, Tahir turned towards him again, struggling to maintain eye contact.
Ultimate light is not dimmed so easily. I know from experience. The light you made with your wife is with you even now. Why the darkness was able to come that close to your wife and daughter, I do not know. But you are not the cause of their deaths. If the Aurora had been nearby, she might have been saved or still died. But you need to know and remember, her death is not your fault.
Tahir slumped, collapsing into his hands as his tears began to flow. Dane dismissed the other clerics, he and the girl staying there until he was sure Tahir could talk again.
Tell me about Talea. What was she like?
The girl asked gently as she and Dane sat on either side of him. Tahir wiped his eyes and began to speak despite his sniffling. He talked of how they met, their lengthy and rocky courtship, and their eventual marriage that brought his daughter. It stung, but Tahir felt hope had returned to his life, a spark of light he'd almost forgotten about. As he spoke, he could feel that Dane had been through something similar, as he would ask questions or remind him of his innocence. Over the next few weeks, and with some counsel from the other clerics, he was able to work through the pain he'd accumulated over the years. It was hard, as he would often fall back to blaming the Order or blaming himself for the deaths of his wife and daughter. But the experience made him stronger than he thought he could ever be. Once he was sure of himself, Tahir explained his reason for coming to find the White Mage. Dane acknowledged his purpose, but said that he couldn't abandon his quest. There was still much to know, and time was beginning to run short. Over time, Tahir began to harbor respect for the White Mage and for his daughter Rhinne. Their goal was lofty, just as Haim said, but it was a worthy goal aimed at helping the entirety of Usoria. He chose to stay with the Aurora, helping accelerate results in their study and practice of light magic. There were times when Dane would disappear for a week or two, and Mars explained that he would visit Rhinne's mother, the goddess of time Ariel. Tahir was floored. This man was not only a lover to the last fairy in all of Usoria, but also to one of the 3 deities that oversaw all of Usoria. How lofty is this man's power? Tahir wondered. Time passed with ease, coming to know Rhinne, her boyfriend Will, and the twins Orchid and Lotus. He could see why Dane chose the Forest of Peace, and now slightly admired the man, thinking that just maybe this white mage could save the world. His research results were promising, as larger and more powerful omens would be obliterated, and his daughter's power seemed to grow over time. Still, there was a nagging sense that something was wrong here. Why was Mars so insistent that Dane remain undisturbed in his laboratory? Why was he constantly locked in there for days on end? What were the screams Tahir heard from the lab while Dane was there? He would have to know one day, but for now, he would respect the wishes of the Order and do what he could to help advance their studies. Hilda slowly opened her eyes when she felt the weight of Magnus's head shift on her chest, making her grin. She put one arm around him, stroking his onyx hair with the other and softly kissing the top of his head. Magnus shifted his position again, his weight sending a wave of comfort and warmth through her. Hilda pulled her arms tighter around his shoulders and chuckled softly through her nose. The memory of when she first met him as an outcast of the Drakova and the following events still rang fresh in her mind. He was strong, much stronger than any man she had ever known, a fact made all the more prominent as her gaze turned to his large sword resting on the ground. At first, Magnus always seemed on edge, constantly vigilant and guarded. Over the previous months, Hilda seemed to gain his trust slowly, and now he was falling asleep in her arms, a sign of unfettered trust among the Drakova. At least, that's what Magnus told her. Did he trust her that much? After a moment or two, Magnus shifted again, pushing his arms under and around her back and holding her firmly in place.
You usually don't move this much if you're asleep.
Hilda grinned as Magnus readjusted his head on her chest.
I wouldn't be awake if you just keep still,
Magnus grumbled, holding her tighter for a moment as he repositioned his wings and found a comfortable position again. Hilda smirked, kissing the top of his head.
And deprive myself of this? I don't think so, Drakova.
Just shut up, Hilda,
Magnus snapped groggily. Hilda smiled darkly, running her hand over one of his horns.
Didn't you say you like my voice?
She teased. Magnus propped himself up, staring her dead in the eye with a sleepy but angry scowl.
Stop talking and stop moving. I'm tired. I want to be rested before facing Valkyrion again.
And yet you're using me as a pillow.
Hilda smirked, reaching up and putting her hands behind his neck. Magnus put his hand around her jaw, squeezing it firmly before gently kissing her and laying back down on her chest, falling into a steady rhythm once more. King Hecaton led a disastrous campaign against Pantheon 3 weeks prior. losing all but 4 of his prized thrall knights. Magnus confronted the new Kaisir, but he and the Shivikova provided much more resistance than anticipated, driving them off within minutes. The king seethed for days after, drawing up more aggressive attack plans, hell-bent on capturing Drakova and enslaving them to become his own soldiers, enhanced to become Thrall Drakova, unstoppable warriors to conquer all of Usoria. Hilda hugged Magnus closer. With a heavy sigh, she thought back to the moment she felt a spark of something in her soul. The Kaisir hit Magnus with a powerful wave of fire during the attack, driving him into a crater. When Hilda saw he wasn't moving, she felt a painful void in her soul. Her eyes shrank to pinpricks and her teeth creaked, turning and unleashing decades of hurt and sorrow onto the Kaisir in magic blasts. After so many years, she'd finally found someone like her. Someone she wanted. Someone she loved. The Kaisir threw her to the ground, hoisting his sword skyward as bright blue flames curled around the blade. She heard him say something about monsters made for one another, but she could only cry out for Magnus in her daze. Magnus appeared over her in a roar, blocking the Kaisir's blow, their swords sounding like massive clock tower bells. Hilda responded by grabbing her staff, pointing it at the Kaisir's chest, and blasting him away with a burst of dark power. But it had a strange, bright, white tinge. Magnus collapsed to the ground, his arm bleeding and his wing dislocated. Hilda put his arm over her shoulder, helping him escape the battle with the help of the only 4 Thrall Knights to survive. Since that day, Magnus seemed more enthralled with her than usual, his hand brushing across hers and being more accepting of her advances. His flavor of affection seemed aggressive, though, demanding her compliance or submission to him, which only excited Hilda more, for she was the same way. Each of them would try and force the other into submission. As her mind drifted back to the present, she extended her hand as dark flames seeped from her skin, thinking back to what the Magus had told them about the darkness he'd brought them.
Darkness is not something to be taken lightly, Hilda. It can get out of control very quickly if you let it.
That may be so, but it's still a great source of power. With it, we are nearing the completion of a means for eternal life,
she thought, as her lips hovered just over Magnus's scalp, admiring the power she felt now that darkness had enhanced her everlife. Magnus held her tighter, his whole being relaxing against her as he fell asleep. Hilda had almost abandoned all hope of finding love ever again since the people of Aswan had crushed her heart. Maybe, even as damaged as she was, she could find something like love with this Drakova in her arms. She held him tighter against her, beginning to fall asleep herself under his comforting weight. There would be more to do. Arcarium and King Hecaton would ensure that. But for now, this was all she needed.
Sleep well, Magnus.